There we go. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the February of, let me get the year right, 2024 already, Global User Group meeting. So anyway, I guess first question is, do we have any news we need to get off our chests right now? I see wide eyes.
I
Aaron,
wasn't even thinking about it, but CribbleCon registration went live last week. So get thee to CribbleCon. Man, I am a total absolute slacker. But yeah, CribbleCon Reg is open. The call for papers is still open. So this group is an especially relevant group of folks. You are our superpower users. So call for papers is open now until I think like March 3rd, maybe March 1st, maybe. You would think that I would know these things. But anyway, it's open until the beginning of March. And you know where to find us if you missed the deadline a little bit. But our goal is also to post all the session topics by March 15th. So I think it's like March 1 that the call for papers ends. So yeah, join us live and in person. It is unfortunately a one-day event again this year, just because of some logistical challenges. We're going to be at Caesars. So not the Mirage, which we may have previously communicated, but it's going to be at Caesars. And so we'll do it on Monday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we will host labs similar to we did last year. So kind of like a trade show booth where there will be demos and we'll have some hands-on labs and stuff like that. And that is probably going to take place at the Wynn. So if you happen to be in town for something else, then the Wynn is like a 10-minute walk. And there will also be, we'll also have some buses to get you over there if you don't want to schlep that far. So that's the scoop. Hope to see, well, really all of you there.
and with any luck, it will not be 192 degrees outside at the time.
Yeah, it is in June versus July, so that's
that might help.
Yeah, might help.
There's a chance it will help and make it a little more reasonable.
There's
But I mean, it's a dry heat, so it feels like an oven, like an electric oven, not a gas oven. There.
So yeah.
Just depends if anybody here makes cookies or anything. You'd know what I'm talking about with the electric versus gas ovens.
And then
Anyway,
I think that's it. Chris, is there anything else?
can you put a link to the current page where they can either the CFPs or to register?
I think Chris already did that.
It is in there.
Look at that. I was just looking at the chat. You guys are like too good. Darn it. Oh yeah, look at there.
Teamwork. All right.
Teamwork.
Let's send it over to, do you yeah, let's let Jay. He's smart and gonna tell us.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking. So I think it's time to move on to our lead person here. So Jay, if you would like to go ahead and take it over, I assume we're going to have about a minute's worth of technical difficulties while we like try to figure out clicking buttons and things.
I appreciate it, Rich. Here, I'll
look at that. It just worked.
All
right, and I will zip and I will let you take over. I'll keep my eye on the in case there's any questions in the chat though. At least I'll try.
Okay. All right, thanks. All right, so the topic I wanted to talk to you about today is collecting and converting JSON events into Splunk metrics format. And I'm going to walk you through our setup, and then we're going to dive into the Cribl pipelines. So the setup I'm going to present today is going to be collecting metrics out of AWS organization, and then displaying and searching them using Splunk. And so I know AWS and Splunk may not be relevant to everybody, so I won't spend too much time there, and we'll focus on the Cribl aspect. But set the stage of what we're going to look at here is the ability to collect metrics out of AWS at scale. So the process that I'm going to go through is setting up what's called CloudWatch cross-account observability in AWS, which is what allows you to manage any number of AWS accounts as a fleet through central management of AWS organization. And I'll be sharing out this document and sample data after the presentation is over. So with AWS cross-account observability, it's going to allow you to deploy settings into each of your AWS accounts in your organization that will link it to a single monitoring account. And this will allow you to have one single account that then has access to your entire fleet of AWS accounts under your organization. From there, we're going to use a CloudWatch metric stream out of the central account to send all of the data into Cribl, where we're going to be doing some conversion into metrics format and then sending it into Splunk's metrics index. So the CloudWatch cross-account observability you can set up through cloud formation templates that you deploy to all your AWS accounts. If you don't use AWS organizations, but you still have multiple AWS accounts, then your setup might look a little more like this, where you could still use your own automation or manually deploy the templates into all of your AWS accounts. If you only have one AWS account, then your setup would look like this, where your monitoring account is essentially your single AWS account. The process for exporting out the metrics doesn't change. So once you have all your metrics available into your single AWS monitoring account, you could set up what is called a CloudWatch metric stream. And that allows you to output your metrics to a destination of either S3 or Kinesis Firehose. In this example, I'm going to be using Kinesis Firehose, but it's not required. You could also use an S3 destination and Cribl S3 source to pull the metrics out of that. When you set up this CloudWatch metric stream, you have the ability to select an option which allows you to include all the metrics from your source accounts. And you can also select granularly which metrics you want to include or exclude from the stream. So you could select a number of metrics that you're only interested in, or maybe exclude a set of metrics that you were not interested in out of the entire collection. For the Cribl source input, it's going to be the Kinesis Firehose source. It's going to collect the data from our Firehose delivery out of AWS. If you're setting up Kinesis Firehose, you want to ensure that you set up a proper SSL certificate and listener on 443. So the easiest way to do that is to put your worker nodes behind AWS load balancer. And the destination for the metrics is going to be Splunk metrics index. So Splunk metrics are time series metrics data that can include multiple metrics and multiple dimensions, and dimensions being the identifiable information of that metric, what the source was, what's sending you the metric. And for that, you need to ensure that you're using Splunk metrics index and not event-based index. So this is what the setup's going to look like. I'll dive into Cribl here and just briefly show you that the source is going to be the Amazon Firehose. Your Firehose input is similar. So like a HEC input, it's a HTTP event collector. It can just receive data more easily. It doesn't have to be in any specific formatting for you to receive it. Where you set up your input, put your worker nodes behind the load balancer, forward the ports, and you use an authentication token when you set up your metric stream. You give it destination and authentication token in Cribl, and that's how you'll identify the traffic. In this example, I'm not going to run live data through the Firehose. I'm going to use a sample file that's been previously collected. So through this, we'll have our metrics being collected out of our AWS accounts and being streamed into Cribl Stream through the Firehose input. Once the metrics are in Cribl. I'll pull up the sample data here. We'll see first off that AWS will send them to you in one giant event. And if we kind of dive in to that giant event and just pull one line out of it, we could see that this is our single metric event in a JSON format. And so what it looks like here is we have our AWS account ID, the namespace, which is what AWS application is generating the metric name. In this case, we're looking at the load balancer metric. So this is the connection counts. The dimensions will include things like availability zone, load balancer name. There's a timestamp, and then our values. So each metric that AWS sends will include the max, min, sum, and count. In this case, the count would be how many metrics did they use to calculate the max and min numbers. In this case, we're only getting one metric, and it's a sum 20 of the active count going into this load balancer at this specific minute. So since AWS doesn't neatly send them to you as discrete events, they'll send them in these huge chunks. The first thing we need to do in our pipeline is to create an event breaker. So our event breaker will now split this into each individual metric, and that was through a simple new line event breaker. The other important thing to pull out when breaking the event is we're going to rewrite the timestamp. Since the original timestamp was when the event was sent into stream, and not necessarily the timestamp of inside the event, we're going to pull out the timestamp and use that as the new timestamp for the event after we break them. The second thing we want to do is I'm going to use the JSON parser to parse this out into JSON events. And we'll see that it extracted my JSON fields here. And now we have similar looking event, just with the fields more readily available for us to start using. One thing I'll add in here is we'll create an extra metric value. So a common one to do is an average. And AWS doesn't send you the average because they expect that you'd be able to calculate it yourself, just dividing the sum by the count. And we can create a new field for average. So if I save that here, now we'll see that we created a new metric value that we calculated ourselves called average and added it into the event. The next step we'll take is to convert this or publish it into a metrics form. So in this pipeline, function, we will call out what the field name that we want to use for the metric value, so our average, count, max, min, and then an expression on how we're going to create and format the metric name that we're going to ultimately use. So in this example, I'm taking the namespace, appending the metric name, and then the value, sample, max, min, sum, and average. And I'm doing that in this format because it is the AWS standard naming convention in this format. So if you're looking for any kind of backwards compatibility with any maybe searches or TAs that use AWS metrics data, this will put it in the same format that those are likely to expect. And so what that would look like is, in this case, you take the namespace, put a period, take the metric name, and then dot, maximum instead of max is what is used. And so this will be the metric name and then the value, in this case, well, that was 0. So that's what your metric ends up looking like. So we'll do that for all our values that we're interested in here. And the next thing we need to do is then decide which fields are going to be our dimension fields. And metrics need dimensions when you're going to be analyzing or searching them. The dimensions will be what object created the metric and metadata about it that you'll be able to use to search based on. So we need to call out what metric or what dimensions that this metric is going to be associated to. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to call out our, say, account ID as a dimension, our region, and the dimensions that are provided. In this case, this is a load balancer metric. So there's dimensions for availability zone and load balancer name. If you're interested in a container or a EC2 or anything else, they're all going to have their own unique set of dimension names that are going to be available. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it out as dimensions star. And that will include this entire dimensions array and anything that's included with it. So when I save this one, we'll now see that it created these dimensions shown in purple, and the metric names, you'll notice that it doesn't show it to you here in this view. And that's because it's going to be calculated when the pipeline actually runs and outputs. The final thing that we'll do here is that I'm going to do an eval and add my index and source type. And that way we can send it to a Splunk output. So now my metric has the index and source type that we'll be using to send to Splunk. So what I'll do is I'll now go ahead and run this in full preview mode and send the data out into Splunk. And I did forget to show, but the Splunk destination, in this case, I just have a demo server. It's a Splunk single instance, and we're sending it over the TCP port. So now that we've ran that preview and sent the metrics over into Splunk, you can run an mpreview command to preview what's inside a metrics index. And as we could see, my metrics are here now, and I have my dimensions as field names here. So I have my account ID, my region, my instance ID, load balancer name, and our metric name here. One thing we'll notice is that we have each metric in one single event here. So in this case, you have these average and the maximum came in a separate event, the minimum came in a separate event, and that is not necessary. A single metric event can contain multiple metrics as long as it's for that same time period and dimensions. So to clean this up, what we're going to do is in our Splunk destination, we'll see that there is a option under advanced settings to output multiple metrics. I'm going to make sure that that is set to yes. And then I'm going to rerun that. And search again. And we'll now see that the metrics are coming in with all 5 of our metrics, average, max, min, in a single event. So this will be more efficient and save space. The next thing we'll notice is
Jay, we do have a couple questions.
Oh, sure.
Cam is asking, does this work with metrics coming from S3 and Kinesis Firehose?
Yeah, so this has been tested using the Firehose data, but the S3 formatted data look similar. I haven't set it up to ingest out of S3 into a pipeline and had to do the event breaking, but I assume it's the same as I've looked at the metrics as you output them in S3, and they look exactly to be in the same format. They're just in a zipped up file in the S3 bucket.
And
I think Cam has tested it using S3, so I think he knows the answer.
Yep, he's trying a little. And then Matthew's asking, do you have any estimation of storage and speed improvement of logs versus metrics on average?
Is a lot an estimate. So when dealing with metrics in Splunk, there's always going to be a speed improvement when using metrics formatted events in an index. We've done it both ways here at our company, and we can make much more intricate dashboard showing multiple metrics overlaid with each other when we're using metrics event formats and longer time spans, running a long 30-day, graph of your CP or something is less of an issue with the metrics than you would notice with events. So it's definitely an improvement to use metrics when possible.
Right. That's my general impression, by the way, of that as well. It's, if you can get away with it, if they work for what you need to actually record and whatnot, that, yeah, going with metrics is, they're quite a bit quicker.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're on par, I think, with running T-stats on ingest time fields. So,
yeah, so you'll get very good performance with that.
right.
And we'll take a look at how to graph these in Splunk and put them on a chart. But before doing that, I actually want to clean these up a little bit more. So we'll see in these examples here, we have, dimensions dot availability zone is the name of the dimension, and dimensions dot load balancer. What we'd like to do is to, again, keep it in line with the format that maybe some example searches or TAs and apps might expect, is to remove the dimensions dot in front of these names. It's also redundant, and when you're searching metrics and you're doing dimension equals dimension dot availability zone, it's a little bit annoying. So what we want to do, it's redundant, yeah. So we want to clean these up and get them as the proper field names without this dimensions dot array in front of it.
Mhm.
So for this, we're going to have to change up our pipeline a little bit. So this pipeline is going to start the same way. We're going to do our standard event breaker and parser to get back into our JSON format here. But what we're going to do to resolve this dimensions dot array issue is we're first going to flatten the data. So we're going to pull those out of an array and flatten them into field names. And that will look like this. So instead of dimensions dot availability zone, we now have dimensions underscore availability zone. But the important thing here is that we removed it out of the array. Now to do some further processing on it, what we're going to do is go ahead and remove the dimensions underscore using the rename function. So we'll flatten and then rename. So now we'll see that we have a field name here for availability zone and load balancer. The next thing we'll do is the same average that we've done before. So we'll add that back in there to the pipeline. And now when we go to publish our metrics, we'll create our metrics names and values. And the difference here is now we need to do some logic when we call out what fields are going to be used as our dimensions. So previously, we were able to use dimensions dot anything as a dimension name. And now we can't do that because we've removed the dimensions dot from in front of everything. Also, we know what all our possible dimensions could be. In this example, we know the dimension is load balancer, but in other examples, the dimension is instance ID. And there's hundreds, maybe thousands of different possible dimensions, and there's no way I could possibly know them all to call them out. So the trick here is to say, well, I know these other fields that are static and they're not dimensions. My metric name and metric stream name aren't dimensions. My values aren't dimensions, and those are static through every event. The only thing that would ever be different is the actual dimension names. So what we can do is when we add our dimensions here, we could say add everything and then exclude the things we know are not dimensions. And so in this way, we're able to capture everything that's left over as a dimension. So what that will look like is this. So now we have in blue here our metric values, and in purple are our dimensions. And so using this technique, it was able to catch availability zone and load balancer as dimensions without ever having to actually call them out specifically by name as a dimension field. And to exclude dimensions, you can use the not metric or not field name to do the exclusion of the things you know aren't dimensions. Everything else gets left over. And so now with this event, I'll do my eval again just to add me an index and source type. And I'll run this through the preview. And now when I view them, let's see, did I do that? Send out. Oh, sorry, give me 1 second. Turn this one on, this one off. Okay. So now when I run that through the preview, you can see I've got my metric here. It's got my 5 metrics in one event the way I wanted it. And it's also got the dimensions as proper field names here without the dimensions dot in front of them. So now I've got the data in the format that I would like. And going back to the search conversations, you would never search your metrics using mpreview. That would be slower than searching event-based metrics. This is really just used for previewing your metrics and seeing what's inside them. To actually search and make use of your metrics in Splunk, you'll use mstats commands. And what those will look like is I'll open the analytics dashboard here and look for the events I just sent in. So what we could see in our analytics workspace is we have those dimension or the metric namespaces that we've sent in. So I've got the application load balancer, active connection count, and some EC2 CPU utilizations as examples. and my average, max, min, sample count, and sums available to use. So you can click and put those on a graph. And then this is how you would be able to create graphs and analyze the data within Splunk. And so what I'll do is share out in the chat before we end here a copy of this pipeline exported, and I'll provide this sample data
Right.
of this file so you can run it yourself. It's
And
just got some
confirm it
fake
worked.
account IDs. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and you're free to use that. And so I think I saw Jeff on the call here, and Jeff Robowski and Amir. Thank them both. I actually had found an old, I think, GitHub post from Amir where he had got me started down this process on the collection and conversion. And thanks to Jeff for helping me get across the finish line with the whole aspect of how to properly rename the dimensions to get it out of the array. He was came through with that one for me. So
Yeah,
definitely
there's a lot of awesome
appreciate
people around here.
Yeah.
All right then. Are there any other questions for him right now?
I'll say I have one. Number one is an event breaker. Have you looked at maybe or why not use the event breaker in your data input or your source instead of doing it in processing?
Sure, that's a good point. So one was to be able to share the pipeline and have it in the pipeline. I could send the whole thing. That's probably my main reason.
Oh no, good
It
call.
sounds like a pretty good one, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Not gonna argue with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for efficiency's sake, though, it might actually be better to move that into the ingestion side of things right? Like
I don't think there's an event breaker setting in Firehose. So the best you
Okay.
could do would be a
Oh.
pre-processing pipeline, which I'm not sure what that really buys you.
Okay. Yeah, okay then.
Well, then that's the answer. Yep.
There you go. Good answer. Number one, it wouldn't work that way. Number two, this way I can share the whole thing anyway. All right. Anything else going on? I thought it was great. I mean, I love all these things. One of these days I'll
Thanks.
start doing more Cribl too. So, but you guys keep me enthused, which is good. But I am going to CriblCon, by the way. I may even bring a friend.
Nice.
Jay, what else were you saying?
Sorry, I wanted to mention one more thing. CloudWatch metric stream pricing can get expensive pretty quickly. I'll include this document with the link to the calculator, and it has an example cost. AWS, of course, charges you to get your data out of AWS. So a metric stream is considered getting your data out. So you're going to be paying. It was a lot more expensive than we thought when doing this at scale. So what you might have to make is some concessions about what metrics you're actually interested in. We weren't able to bring in everything. It would have cost a fortune. So watch out for the pricing. Maybe look at the pricing and estimate it before you do any large exporting. And that's just my warning to you. So take a look at that. It surprised us how expensive it was.
Does Splunk still have the limit sending to them that I believe it's only the first, only up to 150 characters of a metric that count for licensing? They used to this time had that max. In fact, for a while they just had it. That's how much it costs per event. But then they're like, wait a minute. And I think they capped it at 150 because metrics get not so efficient with speed when you get, 14 billion in a individual thing. You really do have to break them out pretty well. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway,
In this example, we're just breaking it up into 5. I think that's okay.
Right.
But right, I've seen metrics that take up an entire page as the event, and those
yeah,
are
those tend to be
difficult.
not as fast as the ones that don't take up the whole page. So
I'm not familiar with the pricing, but I
Okay.
will say that the pricing of our ingest through Cribl and Splunk was a drop in the bucket compared to the metric stream pricing from AWS. So
that's
we
awesome.
had no concerns about our ingest cost. The cost actually was the export of AWS that really got
Okay.
us.
Perfect. Great. Then everything I said, you can ignore anyway, but otherwise just be forewarned, maybe go look that up yourselves.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
all right.
but
Well,
yeah.
that was great.
Sure, thanks. And I will see everyone at CribbleCon. I look forward to it.
Nice. It's going to be a whole group of us there. Who would have thunk? I unfortunately will not be bringing my wife this year because she started a new job and she's not going to be able to get off because we actually like going to Italy and Greece and stuff like right after all of that. I got to fly out Friday, in fact. So I got to figure out how to get my laundry done at some point between.
I'll say, Andrew had a comment or question. What if we did Cribl worker group to worker group with one worker in AWS? Then we could compress that data, leaving hopefully saving on the cost.
Does anybody know?
You won't save on the AWS cost
Okay.
if you're using a metric stream as part of that pipeline. The metric stream aspect is per metric price.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, it's not your data volume, it's your count of them or whatever, right?
count of anything running through that stream pipeline. Yeah.
All right, but good question. All right then. Do we have any other new things, or does anybody want to say like how wonderful the last CribbleCon was, last year? It was great fun if you didn't get there. It was a lot of fun and really interesting and useful too. So, but also just a ton of nice folks, and you get to actually meet some of these people face to face that you've been on Zooms with for who knows how long. So, because I bet you the group that I'm looking at here in Zoom is going to, a good chunk of you folks are probably heading that way, aren't you? Or at least going to try. So that would be good.
I mentioned this last year. I was really, really impressed with the production and the branding on it. Like that was for a one-day event. Y'all didn't, pull any stops. Went all out on it, and I was really impressed by it. And the content, of course, too. But production and branding involved.
Right. We are, just a quick note, we are always, as always, looking for folks who wouldn't mind presenting. Again, it doesn't have to be, super long, super fantastic, or greatly polished. You can just jump into your stuff and start clicking around, maybe even break things. We like that. It's fun. We do it all the time too, right? But anyway, anybody has any ideas, anything that or if you have something you'd like to see, let us know, because we can ask around, and that sometimes jogs people to say, I can do that. You mean somebody would actually be interested in seeing it? And next thing you know, you'll give another presentation. 20, 30 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it takes. So anyway, anybody wants to just ping us in the channels in Slack, and say, hey, I wouldn't mind doing it. I have some ideas, and we can even give a little bit of help if you need it. So, what are we holding up? March 12th.
Next meeting.
Oh, yeah. Great. Excellent. Thanks for the reminder. So March 12th in what year again? 2024 already. I'm remembering now. We will be having our next meeting. Same bat time, same bat channel. Well, probably anyway. Different bat date.